Cool. So, I mean, I would say, feel free, put your hand up. I think the first question was, is there bounties? So, Niels, do you want to just give a bit more context on that question? Is there anything that you want to?
Well, the timelines of Catalyst obviously were quite long, 3 months to get projects funded, which are sized like a couple of $100 until a lot of money. So it would be beneficial if there was some sort of possibility to get a list of stuff you can offer as value in a quicker way, and a bounty system in that regard would be very beneficial.
And what I could say on that point is I think it's a really good call out that, you know, there's a bounties program that's certainly desperately needed within a Catalyst from a number of people's perspectives. What we need to understand is whether that's the will of the community, right? Whether that's what the community want to prioritize to get stood up and over other things. So yeah, it's the bounties program isn't explicitly tied to running you know, instances of the testnet, but I think it's a great idea. Don't see why.
I mean, it's a program of a week, for example. Like if you do design sprints in a week, that could be a bounty, and that's a fund set up for a week. Something like that. Just brainstorming off the cuff.
Yeah, maybe just to pick up on that, Niels, I think obviously bounties are being talked about, right? And it's something that we could absolutely benefit from. There's nothing formal being put into place right now, but definitely being talked about, especially as we look at Catalyst improvements being proposed in Fund 10. But in the context of this conversation, thinking about the continuous testnet, what I think is really exciting is avenues to be able to test different mechanisms so that we can still have accountability, still have decision making, and still have ways to kind of push proposals through that might be decoupled from the actual fund lifecycle. So if we talk about trying to put bounties as proposals and using that same system as a way to facilitate bounties, right, that's still going to have these same long tails, the same delays. But as we get into this experimentation phase that we're opening up with the testnet, right, we might imagine that even though there's no budget at stake with initially, right, there could be some that could be a place where we make decisions, right, to the question. I think Jeremy put it in there, parallel implementations, right? Maybe one testnet is running that is just, hey, here's the latest stable versions, play with them, test them, give us feedback. Maybe another parallel instance that we absolutely will be able to do is related to bounties. Hey, should we have this bounty in place? How do we start to structure that bounty and have an avenue for community decision making where it can still have the legitimacy of all the other processes and just community participation we have in place in Catalyst? It's not only the IOG team making these decisions, but just to riff on that idea a little bit, obviously this isn't a super baked idea, but it's just one thing that starts to open up as we have this continuous testnet is an avenue for rapid decision making with kind of legitimate decentralized decisions. And just that prospect is really exciting. And bounties is one place where that can start to come to life.
Yeah, if you do, and obviously we need to move on probably with other topics, so we'll keep it short. But if you do bounties, you need to have some sort of design system in place that you know that the value that is produced with bounties has a certain level of quality by itself. So it's not new stuff, it's stuff that's needed. So I keep it at that.
Alex, you got your hand up. I wonder whether there's something else you wanted to add to this topic, and you know, for everybody else's benefit, as I put in the chat, Alex is one of our superstars, building out this awesome system. So, how you doing, Alex?
Yeah, hello guys. So actually, I have it's just like random thoughts and a question which is just coming in right now. As we are going to publish all these, like, I mean, Jormungandr as a blockchain, all our system services with all data, historic, etc. Do we want to publish some metric services as Grafana and any other? I mean, maybe to show to the community how our system is doing well, and yeah, just show the metrics of our system services and etc.
So for production and whatnot, the metrics are in our metric system. I haven't even given that any thought about how we would publish that. But for the purpose of running it locally, for sure, we can actually run Grafana in the local instance. So all of the metrics that we gather can actually be seen and interacted with in a development context. But it's certainly something worth considering, Alex, is how we could actually make those metrics public. It's something to consider.
I mean, maybe for the benefit of the people in the room, can we just maybe touch on what are metrics that we care about?
So the metrics would be things like how many requests we're getting on particular, endpoints into the system, how much data we're serving out of the database, how many votes we're getting in an hour, how long tally is taking, how much CPU the nodes are consuming. It's all of the data that we track in the back ends to tell us basically how busy are we and how reliable are we in operation. Right? So and usually you're looking at it to see if you're going to get problems before you do. So if we start to see that the data service is hitting 90% capacity all the time, before we hit 100% capacity and everybody starts to feel bad, we might be able to fire up another service in the back ends in order to give better, in order to give better quality of service. And you can also feed those metrics into your delivery so that you can actually automatically start up, extra services as load goes up and then shut them down as load goes back down again. So that's what we use the metrics for. There's a number of metrics across the system. How we would publish that is a good question. But certainly in the local environment, and I didn't get to show the local how easy actually running a local network will be.
Do that now,
but I can. I was going to share that slide. So let's see if can you?
Yeah, we can see that, Steve.
Can't see anything. Okay, so I've just taken on faith that you can see it. So when we run Catalyst locally, we only actually need 2 tools to be installed in anybody's computer. Docker, which if you're a developer is pretty common to have, and a tool that we have just started using recently called Earthly, which is pretty amazing. And that's where we're doing all of our build and stuff is in Earthly. You won't need to install any other tools, and you can run the system on Linux, Windows, and Mac. We will deliver all of the historical data currently for Fund 0 and 9, and future test events will get preloaded. But to run it, you don't even need to check out our repository. You'll be able to say Earthly. Here I say Earthly plus local. That is if you've checked it out.
No, that's not. No, the VREPs are going to apply for funding.
Sorry?
No worries, it was an accidental unmute from one of the members. Took care of it. Carry on.
Okay. So here where I say Earthly plus local, if that was locally checked out, that will actually build the system and give you local deployment. And then you can say Docker compose -f local Catalyst, and that will start your local environment. And that's all you need to do. But if you didn't actually check out the repo, you can say Earthly, the directory, the URL of our repo plus local, and it will fetch it all for you. You don't even have to check it out. Build it all, set it up for your system ready to roll. Then you just say Docker compose up, and it'll run. So that's as easy as we want to make it to actually stand up Catalyst locally. And you'll get the voting center, you'll get the data backends, you'll get Grafana, you'll get the what else? you'll get all the Jormungandr nodes. You'll be able to vote. You'll be able to set up your own environment, your own events. You'll have to do it manually currently through the database, but you'll be able to use SQL tools to get into the database and add events. You won't be able to import data from IdeaScale unless you've got your own IdeaScale account, but that's why we actually serve preloaded events into the test local system. You will be able to do snapshots provided you've got a DB sync system, because we don't supply that. But if you don't, then you can actually work off historical data, which we can support for the purpose of testing. So that's how easy it should be to stand up a local test environment. I'll stop sharing because I can't actually see anything. I'm doing this.
Cool. I mean, any thoughts, feelings, comments, questions? How does everybody feel about this idea of a
Can you leave the slide a bit longer?
Sorry, Torsten, did you have your hand raised? My mistake.
No, but can I ask Steve to share the slide again?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I can't actually see the screen. My Zoom closes except
I'll
for
do
the
even
share.
better. So it's in the chat, I'll drop directly the link to that slide that he was just showing, because
Thank
it's
you.
in the slide deck that was presented today in the main. It's included in there. I think we skipped it in the live presentation, but that's the one in the chat right now.
So Ryan actually asked if we're planning on just using the voting center for testnet. The initial testnet will be deployed with the voting center. Post Fund 10, and we don't have a timeline for this yet, the voting app will also work with both the local deployment and the test environment. And it'll be fully supported. Initially it won't. There's challenges because it's actually an Android app, and then pointing it to the local environment has some challenges. They're solvable, but that's one of the reasons. So the main purpose of the testnet and the pre-prod environments initially is to have the community actually test the voting center, and for us to refine that. All right, so that we can actually work on the DREPs and that side of Catalyst as the initial area that we need the community to work with us on.
I mean, Steve, I certainly wouldn't mind us walking back through the system slide, and maybe if anybody wants to ask any questions on that front.
Yeah, can somebody else share it? Because I can't
Ryan,
actually.
you still got your hand up. I thought you.
Yeah, I've got another question, if
Hey,
that's okay.
Be loud.
We have many questions.
Yeah, how intensive is it to run this locally on your machine? Can I do it on my laptop?
Yeah, sure.
It's running on laptops at the moment, isn't it, Mike? You've seen Joaquin in that deployed.
Yeah, Joaquin did a demo the other week and just run it all local on his computer. Looked like it was run like a dream.
How many voters do you want to get on it, Ryan? I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? You're gonna put 1 million voters on there, or you're gonna vote for yourself?
A couple.
So I mean, like it's a scalable system, right? So in production, we would have many instances of a lot of this stuff. Locally, we probably have one of most of these things. So the resourcing requirements aren't that high to run it locally for development. But I mean, Marek's got a question.
Yeah, one question. Apologies for my ignorance, but will I be able to change the parameters, like make the votes public?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Any parameters that we currently have available in Catalyst, you will be able to tune in the event DB. So as I said, there's no interface to that at the moment. You have to actually use, an SQL tool, go into the event database, but we document the full schema. It's not hard. So you can go in there, you can set the parameters to however you like. You can run your event and see what it does. If it crashes, okay, well, that's cool. We want to know about that. If it doesn't do what you want to do, that's cool too. And you can go back and play with it however you like.
Okay, and then I can play with the like the voting schema instead of, I mean, how to calculate the winners.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, totally.
This is
So
the background
so we
quadrant.
haven't automated the tally side yet. That's something that we still have to do. So another part of doing this continuous testnet and the continuous automation is so that there's parts of Catalyst which are still very manual. And this allows us, once we deliver the core features, to actually iterate on those and work out how we automate what are currently manual processes. And how do we do it in a way that's secure, repeatable, parameterizable, etc. So that's what we're going to be doing over time after we've delivered the initial version.
Yeah, I this is the point around, you know, if someone's got an approach that they think is a better alternative to the 1A to 1 vote, whether it's quadratic, longitudinal voting, or any other voting machination, that's something that could be spun up within this test environment to be played with in order to get real data using you know, the amount of votes that we've processed, but you know, tallied in a different way, right? That's is effectively what this system will enable people to be able to do.
Yeah, and you know, Jonathan's got a question, but Catalyst is actually quite complicated to stand up. Starting the Jormungandr nodes and getting all the data ready for voting is actually quite difficult. It's one of the reasons it's taken us a while to automate this, is to work out how do we automate it in a meaningful way. But the reason you automate it is so that you don't need to worry about that piece now. If you want to worry about some other piece, you worry about that. The rest of it will hang together and will continue to work. So, you know, these pieces, they're already solved. If you want to go into detail of how does the Jormungandr node start, because you want to mess with that, you can, but it means that you don't have to, right? So it makes it more accessible. That's the idea of it. Jonathan?
Hi, Steve. Really exciting stuff. It's very cool to see all this and have the detail and the information on hand. It's brilliant. Thank you very much. The voting registration part and the snapshot, is, what does that look like in an environment? Is it always taking snapshots from mainnet, or is it from whichever testnet you're on? And
well, I mean, yeah. So it's for both testnet and pre-prod, we will definitely be taking snapshots from the pre-prod Cardano network because it's free, it's easy to use. Mm-hmm. But we haven't done this yet. But it's possible that we could, say, for example, in pre-prod, actually take a snapshot from both pre-prod and mainnet. So you could use, so it's not a real environment, you're not really voting, but you would actually be able to use your registration on mainnet to test, or your registration on pre-prod to test. So for the actual pre-prod environment, that's something I want to explore reasonably after we get it, kind of stable, is to look at merging those, because when you run in production, you're not actually going to use the pre-prod network. So it makes sense to be able to use the data from mainnet as well.
Yeah. And the voter registration, so you're implying that that's maybe, it can be used throughout both, or any net. And so the registration part you could actually design yourself as well, and that's
registration is under SIP. So there's SIP 36, which defines how your registration gets recorded on the Cardano network, and it has to conform to that SIP. So usually at the moment with, say, the voting center, that's done by the wallet. So the voting center asks the wallet to register. The wallet gives you a prompt. It says, we're going to register you to Catalyst, and then it submits that to the network that you're on, or that you ask it to submit it to. Similarly to the voting app now, where, if you use Daedalus or something and it registers and gives you a QR code, it does the same thing, right? It's actually submitting. It's not SIP 36, it's SIP 15, but they're effectively the same thing. It's submitting that registration to mainnet or to pre-prod if you're on the pre-prod network. and we pick those up when we see the registration, and that's how we determine the voting power. Something that we're doing now, which we weren't doing before, is the snapshot tool actually now collects data on invalid registrations. So if there was an error in that, say you wrote a tool and you wanted to post registrations and you got it wrong, the snapshot tool actually finds your registration and say, we didn't use this and the reason why. Was the signature wrong? Was the format wrong? Could we not understand it in some way? What was the reason? And we want to be able to expose that eventually through the UI and through the APIs, so that we can give a better experience to people when they're actually trying to use Catalyst. Like they can actually see, am I registered? Did it work properly? If it didn't, why? Right. So you could say, well, you registered because you registered, 3 registrations ago, but we picked up these other 2 from you and they're wrong because, right? Maybe there's a bug in your wallet. Maybe you're developing a tool. Who knows, right? Why the reason could be, but it's important to propagate errors as well as good state.
It's almost like the valuable data you get out of funnels, sales funnels, like where you're dropping out of the process.
Exactly.
In a voting system, you've got really valuable information there that, if there's just hurdles and we're losing important voices.
Exactly.
Very
cool. We're also tracking now unregistered voters. So we actually keep a record of the voting power of all unregistered stake addresses as well in this process, which is actually quite useful in doing analysis of what the engagement is in Catalyst, or if you're not registered, it'll actually show you, well, there's your stake address, but we don't have a registration for you. This is what your voting power would be if you did register. These sort of questions we can answer because we picked that up in the snapshot as well. So these are new features that we didn't have, say, Fund 9, Fund 8. They weren't available.
I'm instantly drawing a parallel. Some of these features I want in mainnet as well. So for the SPO vote on the parameter change, that would have been really useful information just to see where on earth these 2,000 pools that didn't vote are. Another thing, just quickly, sorry, on your diagram, you've got ingress, and it's got a direct read and write, it looks like, to Jormungandr.
Yes.
So what does that look like?
Well, Jormungandr's got a bunch of APIs, and most of them are not applicable in a voting scenario. So in production, or even in pre-prod or testnet that we deploy, you'll only have the APIs needed to actually submit vote fragments to the network. In a local environment, you would actually be able to, do more detailed inquiry into what's going on into the blockchain. You'd have actually the full API available, right, of Jormungandr.
And so writing directly from that rather than going through.
You're not right. You're calling an API call, an endpoint within Jormungandr that says submit my fragment. The fragment is effectively a transaction that gets posted to the Jormungandr blockchain, which represents your vote. All right, and that's signed by the voter. The Jormungandr blockchain knows who all the potential voters can be, so it won't accept a vote that's not signed,
right? And
it won't accept a vote that's already been cast. So you can't vote multiple times for the same proposal. Right, so it rejects it. So yeah, even though that's open, it's fully secured through the wallet because you're signing your votes. And,
I was wondering whether it would be fit for things like polling, voters as they're going through the gates. You could perhaps build some kind of ballot polling station type thing.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. So it's the blockchain itself which is managing the voting rules and the validating that the votes are valid. And we are. I mean, somebody did ask the question. I'll have to answer Joey's question in a second. Somebody did ask the question about running multiple events. We can actually. That is another area that we want to expand the system into, is to be able to run parallel events. And the way we would do that, looking at this diagram here, is we could actually run multiple leader zeros. Those leader zeros know the particular events, for example, that they're interested in. they won't start if it's not the event that they're after, but they could actually start overlapped from a different event. If we did that, we, instead of posting the vote directly through into the blockchain, we would probably post it through another service that said, this vote is for this event, therefore I will send it to whichever voting blockchain is running for it. All right. It's an architectural improvement that we know we can make. We haven't made it yet. The other way we could do it is actually run multiple networks in parallel. Totally. Like we're going to run testnet and pre-prod. They're effectively running on the pre-prod Cardano network. They will overlap. So we are effectively running multiple events simultaneously. And same with production. While production is running, we'll be running an event on pre-prod and an event on testnet at the same time. So we'll have 3 parallel events. Right.
But just not out of the same event database sort of thing.
Just not out of the same event database, yeah. Right.
Really cool, because that'd be great for. I was asking the question, thinking in mind of, getting more granular voting, so that we've got capabilities of people voting within specialisms maybe, or expertise areas, rather than having a layman vote across the whole voting public.
Yeah,
I think it'd be really useful.
One thing that's interesting here, Jonathan, even when we don't have parallel voting events, right? Imagine just a single Catalyst fund, we might start to see different interfaces that are kind of built fit for purpose for a particular type of expertise, a type of community, a certain type of challenge, right? So we might have this single source of truth that can, accept submissions for all proposals, all voting, but you might build an interface that I only want to pull in certain challenges so that I can provide a really tailored experience for these specific types of experts on these kinds of decisions, which is just like another cool thing that starts to open up as we open up the system. Thinking about that kind of niching down into smaller, more granular pieces.
Yeah, perfect. That's just what I was thinking of. It'd be very cool, very powerful. I'm gonna let people talk now. Thank you very much.
I think Joey was next.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. One is, in my imagination, I think this is going to be a giant leap for the community on what they can do, and where it leads is going to be pretty eventful, I think, for the whole community and environment. So I just wanted to say that. It looks like it's going to be really significant change for all the developers and the tool makers, etc. The other thing I wanted to mention was, you had mentioned about communicating back to you and your team about things that work. Is there going to be a centralized place where we can actually see what everyone is trying? If I'm downloaded to my PC and I'm trying something, can I communicate that back to a place where other people can see what I'm trying?
Well, I mean, that's something we need to develop. Right. So we haven't, as a community, we need to work out how we start communicating, as developers on this system. So one way is we can communicate through our repos. Right. That's a traditional way to do it with a project, but we need to work out where, what are the other ways we want to do it. We've currently got Discord channels, for example, with the wallets. We can certainly have community Discord channels for Catalyst to discuss technical issues, but I'd like to actually explore how we address that with the community, and say, well, what does the community want to do that? I mean, we don't have to necessarily, Project Catalyst, we don't have to run that. It'd actually probably be better if it was run by the community, and we just participate as a community member. All right, that's what I'd be keen to see that happen. But in the interim, we're going to be also doing regular technical updates through Town Hall as a primary touch point, and then we're going to evolve this over time and work out what works best for us and the community and everybody. So, I mean, if you've got suggestions, Joey, then let's talk about it. Let's work out how we can make this work.
Austin, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I was wondering kind of whether it's now time kind of to introduce something like catalyst improvement proposals, because, I mean, at least in this context. just as a channel similar to what Cardano is doing. And there could be, yeah.
Yeah, so we have sort of talked about a system like Catalyst standards, because Catalyst has got like technical standards, like how we want to do things technically, but we've also got community standards, like how does the Catalyst circle hang together? How do we elect people to that? What are the community organizational structures of Catalyst? And it's something else. That's something I'd actually really like to see us, as a community stand up as well. So exactly like you're saying, right? So a way for us to improve Catalyst and create standards that are specific to it. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, similar like a SIP. Yeah, it's not a SIP.
Yeah.
It's a Catalyst improvement proposal, but in a nutshell, it's kind of working probably in a similar way, like a SIP. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I know it's something I've been thinking about quite a lot. It's something we need to work out how we make that work. There's going to be overlap with the SIP process,
for sure.
but I think in that case it'd be worthwhile for us to work out what we want to do in Catalyst first. Come to an agreement and then propose that agreed thing as a SIP. Once we work out, this should be a SIP.
And there might be things which are just purely within Catalyst. Might be. Yeah. So I don't know whether I push it not too hard, because obviously kind of it manifestates itself a little bit in kind of there is a certain type of rules which kind of there are. It would just give, at least on the technical side, it gives a sounding board where people also then can chip their 5 cents in and say, okay, I think this or that. And it makes it a little bit more transparent. I don't know whether it has to be full blown in the beginning, but I think for me, it seems to be the right moment in time kind of to introduce it as a notion.
No, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on that point, with for starters, there's nothing stopping anybody submitting any suggested proposals for improvements to Catalyst to the team today. Generally speaking, when people put forward a well-reasoned and articulate proposal that is carefully considered, it's certainly something that gets discussed and debated within the team.
I'm not saying that this is not happening, Chris. What I'm saying is there is no mechanism which documents it and which includes the wider community to comment on the idea as such. Yeah, so
fully understand
that's the element which at the moment seems to be a little bit missing, as we are more or less now kind of starting to expose more of the plumbing and the engine in itself, and there are some elements where people for sure would come back and say, it would be really cool if you would do this or that in this context. Can we do that? That in itself gives then effectively the sounding board for the wider community who is actually interested in commenting on that, and more or less kind of make it a more decentralized approach, at least to express the kind of intent which the community would like to see expressed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think we're all on the same page that these type of capabilities need to be realized. It's the ways in which we're able to bring that to bear, right? We can't just put in Catalyst improvement proposals into the SIP process currently, because
I'm not talking about the SIP process.
I know you're not. Sorry, just forgive me. I know you're not. What I'm trying to say is, like, we don't have a mechanism. You're right. We don't have a venue for that currently. You're absolutely right. We definitely do need that. Again, the sort of governance of that with the SIPs currently, they go through rounds of revisions, and then there's essentially a parameter committee that looks to make a decision as to whether or not to include them, right? Or they go through a certain set of steps in order to be ratified and then adopted. So we need to be kind of conscious of how we go about doing that. And I might be using vernacular that's not actually how it is, but the point is that Ryan's the best person to comment on this as he's a SIP editor right now. The point is that, and he switches off his camera straight away. The point is that once there are proposals within the kind of context of being ready for implementation, if we were to do it in the current Catalyst process, the entire community votes on that, right? If we would just put them in as proposals, the entire community votes on that. And one of the risks there is that they're just unfeasible to be delivered. Ryan, maybe you can just give just a really quick summary, and apologies to ask you for it, but you know, in terms of how the SIPs actually get adopted, what are those steps?
Yeah, so it depends on, you know, the type of category for the SIP, right? So it depends who has to implement it, because you have SIPs, you know, some are for wallet standards, some are for protocol parameter standards, right? So like a whole idea of the SIP process is about gaining, you know, say I have a wallet SIP, and I'm championing that SIP, I have to go to the wallet community, wallet providers, ask for feedback. During that feedback process, the SIP will be reviewed in the SIP editors meeting, and the SIP editors will make sure it's up to the SIP standard, make sure that the author has gone and got feedback, and then you know, it takes a few weeks to go through their meetings every 2 weeks. So after a couple meetings has gone through and it's had a lot of community engagement, and all the wallet providers are happy with this standard and said they're going to implement it, then it will be merged into the SIP repo as proposed. And then once it's been implemented by, you know, lots of wallets, it will then become active, and then that's an active standard in the in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I really appreciate that summary. And I guess, you know, my question really, Torsten, is do you sort of envisage a similar sort of process in your mind? Or
I actually do, because the reality is now we have, let's say we have an engine which you're starting to expose to a wider community of people who are trying to build some tools on top of it. It's pretty much the same if I have effectively someone who created, and I'm talking now Cardano again, a wallet as a software front end, and on the back end, by a sudden I pull the rug and say, oh, we're going to do it differently. The API is going to be discontinued or it's going to be changed. So you have to have, on the one, has to be kind of like a mechanism by which effectively a change in itself can be initiated, can be discussed, can be agreed upon, and then at the end of the day, kind of like it has a certain controlled environment of implementation. If you're looking at Cardano, IOG is still developing on a number of cylinders effectively aside of the SIP process, but it actually kind of is a communication channel to the wider ecosystem of, hey, we want to have this kind of stuff change because it helps us. So from that perspective, we are sitting now a little bit in a similar scenario here, and from my perspective, it makes sense. But I mean, I'm not a technical person in the depths as a developer, but I think it makes sense to say, hey, we more or less have a catalyst improvement in conjunction with this capabilities exposed. Hey, can you increase, please, effectively the accepted request rate from, let me put a number out, from 10 to 50 because, or to 100, because that would give me this or that capability. So then there has to be a channel to communicate with you. And that might just be that others kind of say, hey, that's actually a brilliant idea because that would give us this and this and this benefit. And then there is at least a documented dialogue around it, and there is a form of agreement around it. I get it. The voting in itself is another element of governance on it. Yeah, how do you find a consensus? I don't have the answer to all of the questions. I'm just throwing this idea out and say, hey, we are more or less having a SIP process for Cardano. Do we need something similar effectively for the Catalyst ecosystem? Fully appreciating that there is an interdependencies and perhaps something we want in itself. Secondary is then leading to a proposal in form of a SIP to the wider Cardano community. Yeah, I am not taking that away, and I get it. I don't want to push it too wide, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you're opening capabilities up to the wider community, the community should have also the ability to raise a voice, what they think would be helpful for them to push effectively things forward further.
Yeah, we all, I think we all agree, right? It's
Well,
obvious.
if you that's normally the starting point, kind of for for unbelievable things happening, where people start to agree and say, okay, then let's push the boundary on that one.
Yeah, the question arises is how, right?
And I mean,
we're all motivated to do it, so we've got to try and come up with a way that actually allows us to do this.
I mean, first of all, you have to provide the capabilities. There is some governance which Cardano in itself has around the SIP process. I would be just as blunt as and say, whoever is passionate about it, let's kind of see whether we can pinch with pride and modify to the extent necessary and make effectively it available in the sense that can we more or less kind of introduce a cat IP, let's call it that way, cat IP for a minute, as an improvement proposal, and starts normally with 0.1. Yeah, which is normally outlining the rules of the game, how this should work. And if we then figure out it doesn't work, then you have a cat IP too.
Yep.
That's the way I would start it. And I'm naively kind of on that one. I'm the blonde one here in the team. I'm not the developer.
we actually have. I actually started a repo called Catalyst Standards just for basically doing this thing, but it's resource intensive. That's the first thing. So the SIP editors actually have, I don't know what Ryan can suggest about that, but it is resource intensive, right, Ryan? There's a significant amount of work that goes into SIP editing and the SIP process in itself.
Fine, that calls me normally. I mean, if I'm an enterprise architect. Normally, that means if shit, either you break shit or you improve shit. That's kind of like normally what you do. Yeah, they kind of do it totally different, or say, how can we do it better?
Thorsten, keep saying cats a lot, and you'll get
cats,
Chris on. Yeah,
cats, kittens, and cats.
Cats.
Yeah, cats.
He likes cats. Categories. Cats. Chris. Cats. Get it. Get a list of cats, man. We want cats. And a SIP is a Cardano improvement proposal. Catalyst is not Cardano. It's an innovation fund. So a SIP isn't necessarily appropriate. So it's a Catalyst.
And I get it.
Parameter.
At the starting point, you kind of take what you can grab easily and say, okay, would it work for us, or where do we have to change something to make it work?
We have the blueprint and the swim lanes and everything for a Catalyst parameter change request.
Fair enough. Put it out to the community, try it out. If it doesn't work, we change it. Yeah,
it's been put out to the community since December of 2021, but I will share it with you directly.
Thank you, because I wasn't aware of that, which means kind of like something was breaking down at a certain moment in time. Either I didn't listen or it wasn't communicated in a way which I kind of could listen to.
Yes,
I get it.
I am everywhere and nowhere.
Okay,
even those
fair enough.
times that break down.
And I'm not saying do something different necessarily. All I'm saying is kind of we are exposing technology now to the wider community, and it would be a good, smart idea to have a channel open whereby the community can say, I would like to have this improved because it helps me in this or that way. Whichever means we are taking, I really don't care. I just more or less kind of try to bring this notion in.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And I mean, I'd love to have a like a ending conversation of a Catalyst improvement proposal versus Cardano. Like, please, let's just get, beyond that. Like maybe one day we'll get beyond the Catalyst DREP and the Cardano DREP, but I am not going to get my hopes up. I haven't seen the movie, Joey, but I'm going to say thank you because I've heard great things about the movie.
Awesome. I did drop it in the chat. Just a quick heads up. If there's any last question or comment, you're more than welcome. But I think we're going to bring the room shortly to a close so we can allow Stephen and Chris to continue also with their other duties for the rest of the day. But Fantastic operations. What time is it for you, Stephen? Can you just let everybody know? 2 a.m. So if there's any burning remarks, please do drop in the chat. Again, we're going to be doing this a lot more in terms of like how the development updates are going to be pushed out. I think what you're going to see on the weekly dev reports also for the Essential Cardano that are more globally distributed on Fridays and through the main channels, that is going to include a lot more information about what's happening on the back end. And then we're seeking, as I think Chris or Stephen has suggested, that to bring that into the town halls as well, so we can bridge that gap between what's happening in the kitchen and what's at the front of the restaurant. So hopefully that's gonna be to the good use. Any last comments? Quasar, your hand is up. You're so excited.
Well, who's in the kitchen? That's what I want to know. Who's in the kitchen? What's the front of the house? And are we still hardcore set on June 21st as a date of fingers crossed?
Don't jinx it, Quasar. We don't talk about that. It's June 21st. It's all or nothing. Let's go.
Beautiful.
All right, awesome. So I'll probably bring the recording to a close. Thank you, Stephen, for taking the time tonight. And Chris, any last words to close at us?
Well, I want to thank Mike and Alex for stepping up as well.
Yeah, guys.
Have them around more often. Ryan, thanks for chipping in. Begrudgingly, but that's okay. And always, Marek, thanks for being here. Thanks for everybody else being here as well. Great to see you all. We'll be back here next week, right, for more fun. Quasar, give us your film report on everything, everywhere, all at once.
That means
we'll do that.
We'll
do that in credits. So just for the audience who has the recording, because it's up, I don't have the button. So